I like to start at the end of the dart where the legs are and put the needles in there, and then do 1 or 2 towards the tip. And remember, we start just like we did our samples. We start at the tip. We don't backstitch. We just go ahead and start to sew. Make sure we stay on that line. And you can backstitch at the end. And then we got to tie our dart tips. So there's only 1 dart on each side of the front, so this is a pretty easy one. We don't have one on the back. Sometimes you'll have darts in the back, sometimes you'll have fisheye darts. And you're going to want to press these darts after you sew them. I'm not going to run over there right now, but you want to press the darts either down or towards the center, remember that? So you're going to press that like that, and you press from this side, and then you're going to flip it over, and you're going to press from this side, making sure it's going down. I'm going to also sew this dart. So again, pinch up at the tip, match those legs. And just make sure that the needle is going through both lines when you pin it. And again, this assures accuracy, because where that pin is going, that means that's exactly the same path your needle is going to take. So you know that if your pin is hitting both lines, that your stitch line is also going to hit both lines. And again, don't forget to tie those dart tips. You can use 1/2 inch seam allowance on most of this shirt, unless it's marked otherwise, and I'll try and remind you if it is. I think we're mostly all 1/2 inch though. So now our front is ready to go. You just press this down, like I said, on both sides, and we're ready to start sewing the rest of our garment together. Now, I want to do pockets with you, so you would actually put your pocket on your front before it gets attached to everything else. You don't have to do that. You can do pockets last, but I find it's easier if you have the forethought to do it now, because then it's only a small piece that you're moving around the machine and not a whole garment, which means you're less likely to sew over other parts of the garment. I'm gonna try and just get you ready, and then we'll do pockets maybe the next demonstration today. But let's do the back first, just so we can have the both pieces ready. So, like I said, we need to attach the yoke. Now our back piece should be on the fold. If it's not on the fold, you're gonna have to recut it. You should have, the yoke said cut one, it's no big deal if you cut 2. But as you can see, this yoke piece is shorter than our whole piece. So we're gonna have to use our technique from gathering, where we make some gather stitches between these 2 notches. So these notches are here for a reason, and you can see there's notches on the yoke as well. And so these notches have to get scrunched in to meet there. And if you look, when those notches meet up, they meet here and here. Now, the pattern itself is for gathers, but you also could do a pleat in the center if you wanted. You could do something decorative, but I'm going to show you how to do gathers. If you want to get fancy and creative, you're welcome to do that. So I'm just going to do a basting stitch number 5 between the 2 notches on the shirt side, okay? So not the yoke. I'm going to leave the yoke alone. So just like we did our gathered sample, within the seam allowance, so less than 1/2 inch, and we're going to leave long tails for this because we're going to want to pull on it. You're going to do 2 rows of stitching. And you don't want to cross them over because you don't want them to knot. We're going to pull them, so you don't want to crisscross them, they won't pull right. So we're going to just take 2 from one side or the other, either the top or the bottom. You can't pull from the bottom and the top because then it won't actually gather. So just one side, and you're going to pull the tails just a little bit, just enough to scrunch that in so that it's the same space as the yoke space between those 2 notches. So I actually went a little far, so you can just release it a little bit. And then what you're going to do is you're going to put right sides together, match those notches, and you're going to pin. I always start pinning where the notches are, and then I go out towards the outside and make sure that everything is lined up here. Now whenever I do gathers on a garment, I like to sew from the side that I can see the gathers, so I can control that they're not folding over in a funny way. So I'm actually going to sew from this side, and I'm going to sew regular stitch length at 1/2 inch. approach those gathers, I'm just going to make sure that nothing gets too, you know, the gathers are sort of evenly distributed and they're not getting caught and folded over in an unpleasing way. And I'm still maintaining that 1/2 inch seam allowance. Don't forget to keep that because that's important for fit. Remember, now that we're making garments, we really have to pay attention to that. You can take those gathered stitches out after you've sewn if you'd like, because they do kind of get in the way, especially with garments. And to do that, you just pull again from the top of the bottom, and with that basting stitch, you'll find, I can grab them. All you got to do is grab one of the top or the bottom, pull them, and they will come right out, or essentially mostly right out. It's got a little stuck. But you don't really want to see those. So if they're worried about seeing them, you can pull them out. And then what you're going to do is you're going to press that down. You can press it open too, since it's a little bit, but it's sometimes nice to press it just all towards one direction with something like this. And you can see from this side, that's what your gathers are going to look like a little. And like I said, you can do a pleat if you don't want to do gathers. We can talk about that if you want to see me individually about that. So you're going to press this. Very important to press this, otherwise see what happens, it gets kind of rolled over. You don't want to change the size of your garment. The next step is to do your stay stitching. Does everybody remember what stay stitching is?
Yep.
Can you tell me what it is?
You have to sew on a 5. I mean, oh, my bad, 2.5.
Yep.
And just going on the curves.
Right, so what two curves being armhole and
collar.
Yep, the neck hole. So again, this is within the seam allowance, so I would say a little bit more than 1/4 inch, but definitely no more than 1/2 inch, otherwise you're gonna see it. You don't have to backstitch, because this is just to make sure that, what is the purpose of stay stitching? Yep, to make sure that those curves don't stretch out. And again, this is better if you can actually press it first so that those lay nice and flat, but I don't want to distract from the flow of this demonstration. So you're going to do this on the back and the front. And as you're stay stitching, make sure that this seam is going whatever way that you want it pressed. Again, another reason to sort of press it. If you guys eventually end up serging your edges before you sew things together, you don't necessarily need to stay stitch. It's not as important because you're sort of stay stitching with the serger. I don't think many of you guys are doing that, and I don't really suggest doing that on these because I'd like to see that you have your seam allowance and everything made, you know, but if you do eventually go forward and start using your serger, like I always serge my pattern pieces to seal the ends off before I sew it together, because if you serge them together afterwards, it's harder to make alterations. Okay, so that is the front and the back, and then you're going to, if you're not going to put a pocket on, you can put them together. So you're going to make mirror images of the front so that the right sides are facing up when you lay this out. And then you're going to do the right side facing down. So right sides together is very important. And everybody's gonna make a few mistakes doing this. It's not the end of the world. We have our trusty seam ripper, and this is a great tool. That's one wonderful thing about sewing, is that it's actually reversible if you mess up. So you're gonna be sewing your side seams and your shoulder seams. Well, I'm trying to think, because I show you guys two different sleeves, that we could do a set-in sleeve and we could do a flat sleeve, and there's two different. All right, so leave the side seams open, just do your shoulder seams actually, and we'll do sleeves next time.
I already closed mine.
Yeah, that's okay. You'll just do the regular set-in sleeve, but one is easier than the other, so or some people like. So at a 1/2 inch, and again, double check that right sides are together. That's the most common mistake. Checking always about the direction of everything. 1/2 inch on the shoulder seam, and you're gonna press these shoulder seams open. Make sure when you do this, you know, you can definitely pin. I'm not pinning. Do what I say, not what I do. But make sure that it's a 1/2 inch and that the raw edges are lined up, because again, this is going to impact a lot of different things. So if your shoulder seam is off, it's going to affect a lot of things. It can affect the collar. It can also affect the sleeve. So if this is too much, your sleeve, you have a pattern piece that is the same size as this pattern. If you sew it too much, it's then going to be too little to go into the other piece. So it's really important, not just for fit, but also for the way that all the puzzle pieces go together, that everything is sort of stays the right size. So why don't you guys work on that, and then we're gonna